Hey Garima, welcome to day 1000.
Thanks a lot, Kavan. Pleasure being here speaking to you today.
You know, you've raised millions of dollars. You've been building a company for 7 years, and I think you've been part of a lot of zero to one and growth journeys in the past. A lot of people want to build in the space you're building in, and hopefully, want to kind of mimic the journey you've had as well. So, the intention today is to extract insights, for founders who are building in your area, maybe want to, answer some burning questions in their mind, and you could probably help them out. But before we get into all of this, Garima, can you quickly introduce yourself and what your company does?
Right. So I'm Garima Bharadwaj. I am the co-founder of and CTO of Enlite. Enlite is world's first cloud-native building automation system. What do we do is we operate across all kinds of commercial spaces, hotel, hospital, malls, offices, GCCs, data centers. And our product, which is a full stack solution, which means a hardware and a software, it automates all kinds of building operations. So when you enter inside any commercial space, you feel the cooling, the heating, the lighting, things to be optimal or non optimal, but they are all automated. Nobody's turning them on and off for you. We take that a notch further. We don't turn them on and off, but we every second and every minute modulate them to optimize the performance of the building for occupants' comfort and also ensuring efficiency, savings, and a green building as an output. So today we are live in about 30 million square feet of an area in last 2 years. This is what we've covered. We work with very large names like a Blackstone, Qualcomm, Sanofi, Embassy, Prestige, Fairmont, so on and so forth. But yeah, core engineering solution ensured to optimize performance of the building so that the occupants are also happy at the same time.
Fantastic. You mentioned these names, which are very large companies. And generally, if you're a founder in the mid market enterprise, sector, the advice which is out there is not enough. I feel a lot of conversations are around B2C, you know do performance ads, do a social media strategy, and you'll get your customers. But generally, when you're building in India in the enterprise domain, is how I'd put it. Huge number of people deciding if this makes sense, thought through process, a long tail process. It's really hard. So there's no trust built at all when you're a company which is just starting out. Nobody, they all think, you're gonna like screw me over. And I think when it comes to your product category, I think the risks are even higher. So could you take us back to, your first few days? Tell us how you actually ended up getting your first customers.
Before my first customers, I'll tell you the first doubts that this industry had. So I mentioned by speaking that we are world's first cloud native building automation system. The world has moved to cloud slowly, steadily, or fast in certain domains, but everybody's moved to cloud from transaction to booking. Everything is happening there. But now you look at real estate, it is very notorious when it comes to adoption of anything digital. And digitally native, you can just forget about it. So when we started making this, everybody asked, going to make a wireless hardware which is going to run intelligence on cloud. Nobody's going to buy it. And trust me, Gavan, had I done any kind of a market research then, I probably wouldn't have started this company because everybody was against it, the market was against it, let alone the marketing. And of course it's a great place to be at when everybody's saying, okay, who is going to buy it now. Thankfully, in our case, what worked is we are not from the background of a real estate or a building automation, and I come from a very different background of building certain 0 to 1 startups in the B2C domain, which have always challenged the status quo. So we thought, okay, we will find somebody who will trust us. And we found, let's say, two people or two organizations who were very, very forward looking in the terms of how they approached making a building. One of them was actually building a showcase site for their customers. And when I reached out to them, they were very excited with the idea that I am building a showcase site for the kind of products that I make. They are also into engineering and they make, again, boring stuff. They make motors and valves, and nobody really knows where they are in a building. So they wanted to show that to their customer. And when I told them that, hey, I operate in a similarly boring space, Can you give me an opportunity where probably I can set up my systems, my devices, my software for your customers as well? And because the person was very experimental, he said, yeah, why not? What is the worst that is going to happen? Maybe something someday might not work, but let's give it a try. Thankfully, everything worked. And today, almost 4 years later, it's been 4 years that my system has been installed there. That has become my showcase site. So, thanks to
Fantastic.
the site, it gave me so many amazing references because the building is state of art of theirs. Whatever they have is boring stuff. And suddenly, when you enter, as a person who has never been aware of what motors and turnstiles and all of these things are, you enter and you're like, okay, engineering is beautiful. It does look nice. So I think the that gave us a lot of confidence. But of course, it doesn't last long because then you meet a normal customer and they're like, but why are you doing this? Why are you moving to cloud and why are you doing wireless? The industry doesn't want it. So I think the initial few not days or weeks but months were very sinusoidal. One day we were on the top of the world thinking that we're going to change this industry. We're going to go out there and market ourselves as the harbingers of this change. And the next day we'd be like, oh, this is a mistake.
Makes
So I
sense.
think
Makes sense.
just like anybody else's life.
Yeah, I think, finding your right customer is the biggest learning, at least I get from your answer, where, you have to find those early adopters as founders because you may have, like in my case, for example, I offer video and design services. Everybody wants it. But I think the hard part was understanding who are our power users because
Right.
those are the ones who kind of ended up referring us more. So,
Right.
fully agree with that. Anything else you used in the initial days to get customers?
So
Any
honestly,
channel?
I use LinkedIn a lot. I'll be very honest. And why was I doing that? Because you can reach out to a normal builder. But that is initially, if you try to reach out and you don't have any credible name under your belt, it is going to take a considerable amount of time. And as a startup, that is the last thing that you want to do, spend a considerable amount of time in figuring out first five customers of yours. So I would reach out to these people who were managing large REITs, which was nothing but, let's say, cluster, somebody who's managing large portfolio of buildings. Think of a Blackstone, think of a Embassy. And these guys are very forward looking because, first of all, their problem statement is very different. Their problem statement is, I want a visibility over my entire portfolio sitting at one place. Now, their cloud works because sitting at one place and having visibility of a lot of places can only be done by one technology, which can be cloud. So, also trying to understand that who actually is that customer of mine, where we can create this need. So, this was one. And secondly, I think when you work with these people, honestly, Kavan, reference works, as you said, right? I always like to call marketing, at least in our domain, I always use the word catenation. You need to have strong linkages from one customer to the other because there is no way in which somebody is sitting in front of a Google and typing which is world's best building management system. Nobody's doing. But people are definitely asking people, how are the services of these traditional companies? Have you used them? So it becomes extremely imperative that we know what is the pain point of somebody, which our competition. So our competition was very, very large companies which have existed for 50 plus years. So while they have a legacy, which is a plus point, but 50 years can also have a lot of pain points. So in trying to understand what those pain points are, we would reach out to people who have managed projects in these large enterprises, and we would go to them when you were executing the project. What was the problem? So instead of trying to really sell, we would go and say, okay, do you have a problem right now? Is services an issue? Was installation an issue? We could bring down the times of doing this a lot because we are wireless and we're over cloud. And people were very forthcoming in giving us that time. We never tried selling initially. We just tried understanding the problem. And then they would ask, but I'll be open to looking at your solution also if you have something. So I think that sort of helped us a bit into to getting into people. And then those people were helpful in connecting us further. Of course, because then they would introduce saying, hey, there's a company in India which has built a solution in India. Why don't you guys look at exploring it?
Absolutely. I think, often uh, young founders of young companies forget that the value you get from giving a fantastic service to very few people in the start can actually bring the exponential growth later on. When people are like, okay, ले लिया है, अभी let's go to the next one, let's go to the third one. But you should really think about understanding in the first year, once the client has said yes, somebody has said yes, are they happy? And
Correct.
most people, unfortunately, don't focus more on retention.
Correct.
I want to now, jump into the next part, right? Where you've got a few customers, it feels like you've got some market fit, and maybe there is some organic growth. You could raise funding, or you could, basically maybe get a large work order and whatnot. Temptation to grow always creeps in, especially, when you are raising money from venture capital. You have to grow in a certain stipulated timeline. That is essentially what's been promised. You end up making mistakes. And my next question is basically on that, right? Like, can you highlight some spends which you regret in your last few years?
Yeah, I definitely can. Now, when you are very new into an industry, you try to emulate somebody who has done a same thing like a large player. And as I said, in my industry, my competition is 50 years old. So, of course, you look at them and you're like, what have they done across these 50 years? And then you think this is the right way to go about it. So, in our industry, which is not only B2B, but the stakeholders are very, very specific, industry focused events. And in these events, people put up stalls. And before we did any event, we used to go to these events. And how we saw it as somebody who was an outsider was okay, the bigger the stall, probably the better they are performing. And you are a young company, so you're just trying to figure out. You go a lot of times by what other industry peers tell you, people who have been then and there for last 2 3 decades, and everybody said that you guys should definitely participate in these events. Now, me
Mm,
coming from a school of thought where event is a thing, it is not the thing. I was like, why do we need to do an event? But you also don't want to make a mistake, of course. Our large competitors are doing it year on year and multiple times in a year, globally, locally, everywhere. Okay, fine, let's do an event. And we did our first event and we spent so much money on that. And at that point, we were bootstrapped. We spent so much money that we had no money to do any kind of marketing for the whole year. And did it give me an ROI? Now that's the painful part. I did not get anything out of that event. But next year you think, okay, now you have matured. If you do the event in a better way, probably it is going to generate a better ROI. And this time there is some internal discussion and the team is like, let's get a bigger stall. And we take a stall so big, one, it could put a 1 BHK in Mumbai to shame. It is that big a stall because you're
uh,
like, oh, okay, maybe this is going to work out. It does matter. The brand visibility does matter. And we put that stall again. And this time, the after the event, even actually before the event ended, we start talking. We're like, we're not sponsoring any event for the next foreseeable future. Because
mhm.
now, across 2 years, we've spent so much money, Gavan, on doing two events that we have zero marketing spend left. Literally, not even a penny left to do even a 10,000 rupee ad on Google. So, what we realized actually the very hard way, maybe for a large company, it is important because they do a year on year visibility. They have a budget which is attributed to doing offline events, and these are great networking events. Of course, I have to give that everybody who is an important person in the industry does turn up for the event, so you can meet people. But that spend really does not work the best for a startup. And for an industry player, it doesn't matter because for them, networking is important year on year. They need to meet the same people. They need to be also present because a lot of the competition that I have, they are global players. So they need to have an Indian local presence. So being in this event really matters. But as a startup, there is no point being seen on a similar space and sharing a stage or a kiosk with them. It really does not cut it out. It gives you networking, but it does not give you the credibility. And that is when we decided that at least this kind of an event and this kind of a grandiose event is something which is probably not for us today. If times change, nobody to be able to comment on that maybe 5 years later Would we do it? I don't know. But at least the visibility that we have today and what we've done in last 1.5 year is take a stand not to be doing these things, because I don't think we are at the maturity level of a lot of established mature players who are just looking at networking and just looking at existing. I want definitely much more than that. And I learned it in a very hefty way, which was very heavy on my pocket.
I think fantastic insight. As somebody who helped startups also do marketing, usually these spurts never help. Your general idea is to be an always on machine and bring everything into that. I think
Right.
big brands do big events because they want to show off. And as a young company, you don't have that money to just show off anything, right? So I think you really wait till your profit pools can fund your brag-worthy, brand building activities.
Right.
You can build brands in very smarter, much more smarter ways, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I want to now get into channels, right? Um, you obviously have to try and try till you know what channel works for you. Could you tell me a little bit about in B2B in your space, right? What was an underrated channel which worked, and surprised you? And what was an overrated channel other than events?
Now, again, this was the ironic part. Every usual channel which a company uses, and especially a B2C and a lot of times B2B, which is your typical Google marketing and Facebook targeting and LinkedIn marketing and so on and so forth, was extremely overrated for us. Absolutely did not work out. Not that we didn't try at some point, because we were like, okay, we really need to be digitally native and all of that. But at some point, you realize it through the way of data, or even when you sit down and you're meeting your customers, who's searching for this? What are the keywords? When we started looking at the keywords itself, Kavan, imagine, let alone I want to buy a BMS. What is a BMS? The searches are not more than 200 in a volume. And I'm saying 200, not even 2000.
Right.
People are not really searching. It is a very high concern, high touch, high value item, which is not found in Google. So we tried all of these things. We tried to do Instagram, and we, of course, because you never know where your customer is and who your customer is. So we kept trying, and we were like, okay, we are really not getting customers from anywhere. So every traditional method that I had used in my earlier organizations and everybody that typically uses, everything failed for us. Nothing worked for us. Now, interestingly, what worked for us finally? So, this is a very, very high reference market. People not only need to know who you are, people need to ask somebody else how you are, how your performance is, how your execution is. So, at some point, when I was talking to a bunch of customers, I realized that, in every city, there are different WhatsApp groups of facility managers of buildings, and they talk about a lot of products, and building management is one of those products. So you can be on their WhatsApp, and you really don't have to bombard with them what your product is. You can just keep sharing with all of these people what are the good practices in building these days, all of that, and then you can do some sort of a closed door event of, let's say, 10-15 people. So that really helped us out. Secondly, so there are influencers in our industry, which are not the typical Instagram influencers that are there, but people who influence every decision of buying that's made in the terms of a building material. So, an architect is an influencer. A lot of subject matter expertise people who are consultants who tell which system to use, which air conditioner to use, they are influencers. So, we made them our channel partners. So, we started educating them on who we are and why are we different. And over time, they also understood that there is a glam version to the entire product as well, because apart from the hardware, there's a very, very cool aspect of software layer that we have, where you get insights, you get a lot of AI enablement there. You can ask questions, you will get answers around your building. And they were like, okay, we've not seen something like this. We can always suggest. So they started suggesting, we started getting calls. That part was very interesting. And the biggest surprise for me was there was a period in which the number of calls onto our company phone increased, and we had no idea why, because we are like, okay, we are not doing anything Google, we're not doing anything at all. And when we started asking people, they were all coming through ChatGPT. What we had done in last 4-5 months is really optimized our content for GEO, because we knew that SEO was not working for us. But the second realization which happened was everybody in a building, from the buyer of my system to the user of my system, and all of these personas are very different, they use chat gpt in their own regard. Now people had it on their phones, some of them had it on their laptops, and they were asking anything and everything. From now, what is a BMS? The beauty of this entire experience is, unlike a Google, it does not stop. It does not give you a definition. It gives you a definition, it gives you an example as well. So if people are asking, what's a cloud BMS? It was also giving an answer, Enlite is a cloud BMS. When people were
Mm.
asking, what is a wireless building management? Even Enlite was an answer. So we had really worked on optimizing our content that way. So that is when we realized, okay, this has finally worked out for us. What a Google could not do, a chat GPT definitely did for us. And we were getting messages from our customers or screenshots. Hey, we found you on chat GPT. So they think that we are doing well because we became a chat GPT discoverable. That worked out for us. So I think we tried a bunch of things. Some worked, some did not work. But few hyper personalization techniques through digital routes definitely worked with us.
Fantastic. I think you've done a great job there. Anything with the overrated channel other than an event?
Overrated everything, I'm telling you. Google is overrated for me. LinkedIn is so everybody has tried to sell the LinkedIn navigator. I'm like, I'm no way I am going to buy this because it's not working. In fact, at some point we were suggested, why don't you put your posters on your hoardings in buildings? We really gave it a thought, but this time we're like, we're not going to burn our hands onto getting it printed, because then you are like a food delivery system. People are looking at it, nobody is buying you. You'll put, hey, I'm Enlight, and they'd be like, okay, they don't give food. Why am I even looking at this poster right now? So I think every method, Kavan, which is a traditional way which works for everybody, did not work for us at all.
Fantastic. Got it. Got it. Thanks for that. As a parting thought, I'd like you to, I think, just cover the most important part, I believe, for any founder building in the first 1,000 days, which is getting through the first 1,000 days, right? How did you do it? And what's the advice for somebody to actually survive the first 1,000 days?
Actually, first 1,000 days are very, very difficult because that is the time when you are doubting yourself and you cannot say it out there. You work with a team of yours who are working with you because they believe in a vision that you have shown to them. It is very difficult when you start building something new. So, for example, in our case, we were trying to build this for the first time. Nobody had ever done it. So, one had to be mad delusional about it. So, please be mad delusional. I believe motivation and discipline is great, delusion is paramount. It is extremely important because no matter how bad a day goes at the end of the day, and days will be more bad than good initially, you have to get up the next day, think that today is going to be better. Somehow, at some point, it works. And that some point comes many, many, many months later. And that is when people are going to come and say, and you're going to say, oh, something changed today. No, you have been thinking about it every day that one day it is going to work. As long as your mind and heart is in the right place of creating what you're creating, then be please very practical about your product and very delusional about your success. There is no way in which it is not going to happen.
Incredible. Thank you so much. You are incredible, Garima. I hope you had a good time here.
I absolutely loved speaking here because this is the first time I'm speaking to somebody on the marketing part of it. That is the last thing in the world that anybody asks me. Because again, as I said, it is the most non-glam industry. Nobody really wants to know आपके यहाँ कौन सा BMS है. So I loved speaking here and I hope it made some sense.
No, I think it's always fantastic to speak to people building in areas which are very uncommon because so many insights come and you learn so much about, I think, first principles of marketing, customer experience, client behavior. So you were fantastic and thank you so much for coming on board. For everybody who's also tuned in, thanks for waiting till all the way till the end. If you'd like to hear another amazing founder, please subscribe to our channels. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot, Kavan. Bye.